First off, I mean, obviously T-ball, we want them to have fun. You obviously want to put them in a great position. Not too many mechanical things at that age. They're just still trying to figure out how to generate power. So in the last group, I kind of went over an easy system that I think really gets them in tune. And to start with, I'd say obviously everyone's done a little bit of the half kneeling start. But the purpose of this one, I think, in my opinion, is trying to get everyone's hips engaged so that this can just go along for the ride. The throw isn't as important. We're just trying to get us connected. So I would like to always talk about pushing into the ground to create space so that they have that shoulder-hip separation. So when you're doing a half kneel, I'd say obviously getting this shoulder closed is good, but trying to really push into the ground. And when you push in, trying to make a little bit of space here for about 5 throws. But if you're seeing this, obviously that's not getting the drill. They could either push back in here, but you just want to see a little bit of rotation before the follow through. And it doesn't matter, we'll do both legs. This is gonna feel a little awkward for most, but same thing, pushing through that knee, but this time hands go over the knee. Try to always keep a nice big chest. If you see them kind of hunched over and coming back, it's just them trying to generate, but for the most part, same thing, push into the ground, trying to create space here, close down the shoulder, and then it's just kind of an arm flip, nice and easy. From there, I like to work up as a left-hander. My right leg's gonna go forward, and I'm just gonna kind of brush my hands in front of my knee and then work back up the chain. So it's just getting them used to everything's about shoulder, hip separation. This is what you usually see. And then guys are kind of usually coming on an ellipsis, a little bit of a blend between the two, almost like if they had a sledgehammer. If there was a hula hoop here, it'd be there. So with this drill here, you kind of want to see a little bit of close and not so much a merry-go-round opening, but working into the ground and trying to fight back up over. So they got a little bit of lag and resistance in their arms from that one. And then this one is the same thing, working back over through where this shoulder's closed, and then they have to kind of push against the ground to get themselves forward. I like these ones a lot because the ground is now a part of it. The worst thing that I think I see is when you just see kids kind of not really have their legs engaged, and it's hard to do that with shoes, and if it's a little more challenged in the hips or whatever it is, everybody's got tightness somewhere. The easiest one to go from there, same thing with a split stance. Everyone's done this one before. I like the ball mount of the foot kind of into the ground, have them load up, and this is where you want their hip to come flying through, and just to try and get them used to generating a little bit of power back and getting that release forward. Same thing, we're gonna switch again. This one's gonna feel the worst for most of them, but dropping your back knee, getting that shoulder fully closed, and then working back up the chain. It's not supposed to generate a ton of power, but it's the same thing. All these 4 are about them getting that sequencing properly, where it's hips, then arm, kind of hips, shoulder, and then all the way up without having to say that to them. You can kind of get it going with some exercises and drills. Balance is going to be big for the little ones, trying to make a game out of it. There's one I like to do with a triangle where you kind of have, let's say it was, a cone there and a cone here, and you're just, as a warm-up, trying to get them with one leg down, working on just balancing up with a little bit of a knee lift and working around with each hand and then switching so that they get used to this type of extension and sensation. And once they are good at that, you can kind of test them out where if there was a ball on the ground, same as the throwing arm, same leg as the throwing arm, reaching down, picking up the ball, coming up to a balance point and go. If they're struggling with that, which I bet a lot of them will be, the best one is to start with their throwing leg or their same arm as leg up on the backside, trying to keep a nice big chest and having them try to stand up through. This will keep them grounded. This will keep them so that their legs are involved in it. Maybe it'll be a little sequencing or delay, but at least that it won't have this where all the strain and stress is going only to their upper body. They're going to be obviously not honed in, but if you kind of distract with a routine, that creates focus and simplifies the task at hand for them. And I think that's probably the biggest part about pitching is how do I have my routine just to be very simplistic so that it creates the result that I'm going for, not trying to create huge pressure or aggression one way or the other. From being grounded to visualizing and painting a picture, I would stress out visualization with the amount of games and stuff that they play. Everyone's seen a streak off of a ball on like a PGA or MLB, and that would be the one thing I'd tell them, is to have their own unique way of routine before they make, once they are pitching, what they're going to do, what they look at right before they go. An example would be, I don't know if they're going to be taking signs, but they have an idea of what they're going to throw. They come set, maybe it's a breath. They look where they're going to go, maybe see a color of a streak on glove side, keep it simple, glove side or arm side, and then make the pitch. And it's just like a golfer's routine. The simpler you make your checkpoints, then you can just go and launch without having to have too much up there getting in the way of what you should be doing. I know I keep saying they're young, but it's definitely something where the more you can get them ground up, the easier it is going to be on their arm, and the more they're going to have their sequencing in play.
So we're a team. What do you recommend for like the lowest level of just like, I've never seen a baseball before,
I'd say
and I need to throw it? What do we start with?
The knee stuff, ground down. This is probably, I'd say, the biggest tell, because a lot of them are probably going to, not have the strength and lean over to go up. So trying to get them used to just getting to the point where they are a little bit more balanced, and maybe having a little bit more, they're just going to be playing catch, I think, for the most part, and figuring it out. But that'll be the best. I have guys that are, my buddies that are doing it at the highest level, where they always go back to the basics of that type of stuff to try and get their hand arc going. No, I don't think there's an arm angle that's terrible. Obviously, you don't want to see something like this. An easy drill for them is try to keep the ball against their chest for as long as they can. Eventually, it's going to come off, but it'll probably negate some of the long swing effects, so it'll get them to turn, rotate, and then try to fire through. And that's usually when they're in a little bit closer, but I'd try to say they're rotating around the ball and then creating the lag is how I would say, most people throw. If you see any reach back, you can just calm down this arm circle and just try to have these two things mirror when they're little. If you see them, this hand low but this hand long, probably not the best. You want, usually if someone's a long thrower, you want that front arm to match that arm. Or if someone's short, try to have it be similar. And then the easiest one to see is when they go to throw, you want as soon as your leg starts moving, these hands are starting to break down. And you'll see sometimes they'll break down, they'll still be here, which makes it a little bit harder when they're smaller to get back over the front. So getting some type of arm swing, I'd say going for the younger ones would be best, to find a way to create that power without it being more one of these things. You get it going down and then back up. And an easy one for them too is I'm sure you guys have seen figure eights where the guys go like this, but just trying to find a little bit of bounce and rhythm while they're young to feel that nice sequence and release when they're going. But I know they're young, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of a few more in that way.
How do you just get them to maybe be more accurate? Probably not going to get power or something.
Right. Accurate, I'd say, for making a game out of it too, like headshot, chest shot. We like to maybe not use the word headshot, but a game where, yeah, but something where you let them get loose. You take them through the first 20% of its routine, stretching and getting hips loose. The next part is just playing catch to where they're a little bit more focused. And then at the end, once they kind of bring it back down, make a game of it of 4 corners and have them compete best of 10 with their partners to where they'll still be engaged is probably the hardest thing. I don't know if you guys have played knockout before, but it's just, it's something fun where they have their attention and they want to throw a strike to stay in the game a little bit more. Anything to gamify the situation, I'd say, gets their attention and accuracy at least a little bit more attentive. But in regards to how to be accurate, it's just going to be routine and repetition. And I think it's hard at that age to want to find those types of results, but at the same time, those things will put them at least in the best position to be successful, I think. I'd say for sure the front shoulder being closed. Closing the door, where most of the kids, they'll throw like this. But if you can get them to close that front shoulder, it creates a lot better chance for them to at least not only maybe be accurate, but have a little bit more giddy up on something for something, someone that small. So I'd say for sure getting this a little bit more closed. I know that's sometimes advanced, but I'd say stepping through with your throwing leg, and then we close the door, and that's a nice one for them, where you just make sure they get either this hip or the shoulder will follow along the way. And then when it comes to throwing, having a nice arm swing, I'm trying to think of a good way to, swing and wing, I think would be a nice one, as opposed to just holding and going, trying to get a little bit of a bounce on the backside. But I'd say for the most part is positioning of having this closed, and then maybe having a consistent step spot where they can go over and over again. But yeah, I imagine at the lower levels, just even the basics of playing catch, catching the ball back and forth is probably pretty hard. And yeah, I'd say a nice easy one, we call them D'ing up, like everyone's seen somebody in basketball, slap the ground. And so I'd say, parallel, just like a crow hop throw, is getting them to kind of touch the ground so that their legs are moving and their hips are going. And that's a nice easy one where all you have to say is touch the ground, and they still get to move. I like them working on their footwork as well, that they're going to use in all other aspects of the game, where you try to have them go little steps into a big shuffle. So it could, trying to find a sequence pattern like that, where either the ball's out in front of you and you're trying to get them to go chop, chop, hop. So that's one that you can do, or the one where you say where it's on the ground and you just have them real steady going. But I like when they're moving fast, because then the body has to figure it out. If they're moving a little bit quicker, the arm will move a little bit quicker and they can get out front. Yeah, that balancing one probably won't work out the most, but I'd say between this one and this one, for them to be in a proper position, usually most kids have the most fun with that too, because they're a little bit more athletic, and you'll see more natural arm path come from there, as opposed to the stagnant. You could probably identify if a kid's more of a Ferris or a merry-go-round versus a Ferris wheel, and then help him out from there of where he needs to be. But I'd say, at that age, trying to mirror these up, however, the front side should match the back side. Getting their legs involved is probably the most important, so that this just happens naturally and it's just a easy movement. And then, maybe a little bit more once they're standing up, having a little bit more of a bounce. Or you can have them bounce on one leg they're tiny. I'm trying to think of if they can get a little crow hop going with the same leg. But anything that just forces that ignition part of it for them at that age, I think is the best way to get that arm to get going. And you'll see right away if they're not closing off or those drills, it's like everybody's going to look the same for the most part, depending on the arm release. So it'll be an easier tell to see if somebody's not doing it. And I really like doing both legs up, because it forces them to kind of get that mobility in your T-spine going, which is a lot of pitching. But at that level, I'd say anything where it kind of manipulates them into the throwing position, where I pointing and throwing. The reason I like that one is because there's a little bit of tempo in it. There's a little bit of feel to it. So if you want to point, maybe they're not comfortable and their arms in here, having something that they look across that gets this a little bit more consistent, and then it'll get out of the way. This will, obviously long has to come all the way back in for this one to come up if they're not long, but just having something over their sight line that they can look through when they're throwing gets at least by default that shoulder closed a little bit more for the aim point thing. I would say point is harder for them to get back into a good strong position. The wave and throw probably gets them more into that mode, yeah. But if they're pointing and you see that they have enough coordination and it comes back in fine, I would stick with that. And that's probably the hardest challenge, is they're all going to generate power differently. Some are going to be really into their legs, and some won't want to let this get back at all. So doing those things from the ground up, I think, are by far the best ways to get this sensation going, where they're trying to generate energy like in a phone booth. You know, if you try to describe to them if they wanted to punch someone in a phone booth, and just did that, that's not generating. But if you get into your legs and rotate around that sucker, you could probably get somebody pretty good. And that's what you're trying to instill in them, is like being powerful, short, and then the last part is where you get to be fun and quick. And I know it's a lot of talk, but I think it's just any way to try and trick it into like a game of some sorts to where their legs are using and they're shutting it down before they get back into the power slot. They'll start to figure out, well, if I just go like that, like how do I generate energy? And if you can get them to the top of pushing the knee into the ground, keeps them grounded, and all of a sudden I have all this clearance back here to generate energy somehow without having to, move.
Same side, but opposite.
No, we're gonna, I mean,
I'm picturing for T-ball.
Right,
I get your point. So I'm picturing T-ball and only doing the non-throwing side forward and up. Because
Well, I
and we
noticed
know like, if they're good and everything, then I build the strength by
yeah,
doing
sorry.
both ways.
Okay.
Like, that's what I'm
Yeah.
picturing. Because they
Whatever-
they want to.
Yeah.
But I see it. You want to lose the ball.
both sides, and it forces them to stretch and find a way to create space, which is, with their forward, right.